It's time for the Dynamics AX podcast. My name is Fredrik Sætre, and I'm joined by Tommy Skaue and Dr. Scott Hamilton. And today we're going to talk about everything that Scott has done with his books, how he's working, and whatever he thinks about Dynamics AX and Dynamics 365 for operations. So stay tuned. This is the Dynamics Podcast, Episode 6, recorded December 19th, 2016. Great, Dr. Scott. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dynamics AX Podcast. My name is Fredrik, and I'm joined, as always, by the number one MVP here in Norway, except for myself, of course, and Kurt Hatlevik. And he's also a national champion of breakdancing. Hello, Tommy.
How did you figure that out?
No,
that was supposed to be a secret. Okay, but thank you.
Yes,
I'm good, thank you. And,
I might embellish a bit, but you do have a dancer's body. You're how's the weather up in the northern parts of Norway this year?
We had a couple of weeks ago. We had white snow. And it was beautiful. Right now, it's all rained away. It's just rain all the time. So it's not going to be the white Christmas unless it switches. I don't know.
Is it sun?
We'll see.
Kind of melts all the snow away.
Are you asking for the sun again? It's not going to happen for at least a month or.
But it's changing now. You got 2 days more of the wrong way, and then it's slowly getting back there.
It is turning. It's coming back in the mid of January. I'll see it.
Also, joining us from across the pond again, but this time I've made sure that we got great audio. So hello again, Dr. Scott Hamilton. Hello.
Oh, thank you. A joy to be with you again.
Oh, yes. Thanks. Thank you so much for coming back. We had a great podcast last time, but alas, I broke it, not we. I won't pull Tommy into that, so I'll take the full responsibility, and I'm so happy we'll get another chance to pick your brain. And because you've been working with AX for quite a while, also published a lot of literature on the topic.
Yeah.
And
we have the same problem here that Tommy does. It gets dark and cold for several months, and there's not much else to do up here.
Yeah, because you've got snow.
That's right.
Oh, that is an envious. I feel Christmas is. It should be. I've got my Christmas shirt on, and Santa's here, but the snow's missing, and it does bring us a bit down. But when I was small, a lot of snow. Not anymore. So kind of looks like something is happening. It's getting warmer. Well, we have to talk about these books of yours because you sent me a book, and I've kind of started reading it a bit, but time and Christmas preparations and everything. But it's really nice books that you've written, and we kind of want to pick your brain on your process and what you do and how you've seen this system evolve over the last couple of years. And you write, you have a column. You don't blog and those types of things, but you do have a column at MS Dynamics World, which we're looking at now, where you can get everything from your books. We have pretty many books that you've published over the years. Well, it says like Sapta, so that's a blast from the past. And on the bottom here, there's a lot of articles. How many articles do you have up here now?
This one has more than 70, and the one I used to publish for technologyevaluation.com, so there's another more than 20 there, and actually from an academic, I think I've written 20 to 30 articles. Okay,
so not all are in here, or are they?
No, yeah. This would just be the ones in the last 5 years.
Oh, yeah. Also, a fellow MVP, have you been to the summit?
No, I keep thinking I should, but I try the other ones, like the tech conference or the X users group. But I've been active in the users group for ever since that really came up to speed.
Yeah, the user group is getting a lot of headway now and traction. It's getting very popular also with partners and not only in the US, because it's pretty big in the US, right?
Traditionally, this is where it's been strongest, but little by little, I think it's evolving in the other countries in Europe, Australia, and so on.
Yeah. So it's following and growing with the product. And you sent me a presentation just to illustrate how you feel that. How do you feel that the product has evolved in the last couple of years now?
Well, that's if I could, I'd like to maybe give you the quick background on the various books I've written and the research, so that, because the subsequent topic would be, if that's your research, what have been the evolving trends, and that, if I could just delay my answer on that momentarily.
Yeah, but take us through your books and everything that you've written.
I'll use this diagram you're pulling up right now as the quick summary. And what I'm trying to show here is, in 2001, I was a vice president at another ERP software company called Fourth Shift, and we ended up selling that off. And so I kind of summarized my research to date. And so what you're seeing on the far left-hand side of this figure is a book called Maximizing Your ERP System. And the subsequent books to the right are, well, I basically took what amounts to the theory, the same stuff I'd been teaching at the MBA level, as 20 years of consulting with other ERP packages, and wrote the textbook for McGraw Hill. So the books to the right are basically taking the theory, saying, how does this apply to Dynamics AX? And at the time, that was called AX 3.0. Subsequent books covered 4.0, 2009, and so forth. You can kind of read them left to right. And with the segmentation in the software that was introduced, there's additional functionality for process manufacturing. I tend to focus in manufacturing. So you can lean across the bottom. I was originally publishing articles in technologyevaluation.com, and really I've focused just on the MS Dynamics world since then. So that's kind of a summary of the articles. Now, I think the book you have is this 500-page book. These books tend to run 500 pages. Is that correct?
Yeah, the one I have is managing warehouse management.
Okay.
It was probably
right. Okay. If you skip to the next slide, one of the dilemmas I was facing as I consult would be 500 pages is pretty intimidating to a beginner user. So this year I came out with a series of guides called the Essential Guides for Supply Chain Management, where each book is about 100 pages. And this is kind of graphically shows, the starting book is covering supply chain management. Think of purchasing, sales, transfers. And level 2, it really depends on which warehouse management approach you take. Is it basic or advanced? And if you're involved in manufacturing, what type? There's discrete, there's process. If I kept going to the right, it would include lean manufacturing, project-oriented manufacturing, and so forth. So there's a number of variations of what I'd consider essential guides for a beginner.
Are you writing these books?
Say again.
Are you on the topic of writing these books, or is it? Are you handing off the stick to somebody else?
Oh no, these represent abbreviated versions of the 500-page book. In the longer books, I suggest, look, here's the key topics to cover.
Yep.
But for a beginner, it's still pretty intimidating to say, you mean I have to go find the 100 pages which are most critical? So I basically abstracted it down to 100 pages. So in essence, the in-depth, all the possible variations, which is what I might cover in the long book, you cover the basic ones, which are absolutely fundamental to know to really effectively use AX.
Yeah. The way that you write these books are basically you want to focus on the subject matter, right? It's not like this is how you set it up, but this is how the system works and the technology and the processes. This is not a step-by-step screenshot type of book where you where you create everything from A to Z, but it's more of a flow chart and overview book, which can really, you can really get into and use that as a reference guide instead of kind of like a click by click manual.
Right. I've taken the approach of the business processes are, the key thing to organize your business around. And in most companies, you can walk in and you'll see, I'm going to pick manufacturing, you'll see several dominant business models. And then you do get the outlier business processes, but, focusing on the dominant models. If you can address those, think of sales orders and the associated pricing and warehouse management and so forth. If you can manage those business processes, you tend to have a cleaner, faster implementation. And I think we're seeing it showing up with some of the tools from Microsoft, their lifecycle services and the whole business process modeling, but that you can even estimate your implementation time based on how many processes you're trying to deal with and how complex they are.
Yeah. And the system, it grows over it's you have to keep in touch with the technology, and everything updates kind of quite rapidly now instead of like sequential as it done before. But you've been in AX since version 3.0, so it's been like 13 years now. How have you seen the system kind of grow into what it is today and over the last couple of years?
And if I could, I'm just going to use a prepared slide. I'm being a man of few words. I'll use the picture. If you could bring up there's kind of a next one after that, right there. This is also in an article in MS Dynamics World, but the point is that there's several inflection points I've seen since I've been doing the research back in 2003. But 2009 was a major significant change. Another change occurred in 2012 R3. Now I'm talking, my sense of change is, by the way, is the size of the footprint of supply chain management functionality. So you will see here, we didn't see a major change in functionality as we moved to Dynamics 365 for operations is what it's now called, but we have seen a major change in the user interface, and that actually occurred before, back in 2012, but the conceptual model, which is what I write to, has stayed the same, meaning I really don't care how you come at it, by handheld devices or any other devices, but the conceptual model is the same. Just one other final point on this diagram. I use the page count analysis to represent how complex or how broad is the footprint of functionality. And in 2009, they introduced lean manufacturing through an acquisition. They introduced process manufacturing through an acquisition. They also had projects and service orders, which were there already. But had I included those in this diagram, the proportions would be about the same, but meaning in terms of incremental changes. But in 2009, with those acquisitions, the footprint almost doubled. So this diagram I was trying to show you, there's this incremental changes. Now, I'm projecting that as we move into Dynamics 365 for operations, that there will be significant changes that will come even faster. So if you could just flip a slide forward, I believe I'll show it to you. I may have to ask you to do more. A quick summary. In my articles and in my books, I try to write what was different between these releases. You'll see that as we move to 2012, there's the major changes in the item definition, the resources, the custom products manufacturing, and so forth. If you go to the next slide, as you went to 2012 R3, the biggest change occurred with the new advanced warehouse management. There's incremental changes throughout. Trying to show this diagrammatically. And if you go to the next slide, this is where I'm seeing the evolving scope, meaning I'm seeing it, the projected scope as we move forward into next year and beyond. And if you go to the next slide, I try highlight where are these coming from. The first one, I'm guessing, are probably more acquisitions. The software enhancements, this is where I'm doing a deep dive into Dynamics 365, and there are a lot of what I'm just going to call continuous small enhancements. You can't say it's a major change in the footprint size, but I'm seeing improvements throughout a lot of business processes where, from a user and as a consultant, I compliment Microsoft for sticking with it and keep improving what they have.
Yeah, because we've seen that with earlier versions as well. Like in the 2012, we had the community updates that come every other, well, it was 4 times a year probably,
Right.
or more frequently. That had these kind of small incremental changes, and then they did the big leaps like the
Right.
R2 and R3, and
Mhm.
those carried even more changes, and now they're kind of frequently doing these updates all the time to the system, and it looks like it's going to be there's no end in sight.
Well, on that slide that you had up, there's 2 or 3 things which I thought were interesting, and that number one was I think they're making it possible for the rest of us in the partner channel and so forth to really make things accelerate. It's this whole Azure marketplace. But one of the other fascinating things, the online help, it's called the wiki help, can be authored by people outside Microsoft. So you have this continuous improvement of documentation in addition to functionality.
Well, Scott, I got a question for you. With those acquisitions that Microsoft made when they added more functionality to AX, they obviously had to choose which solution would they acquire. Do you think, in your mind, do you think they acquired the right solutions, or did they potentially have to choose between competing solutions and could have chosen a different solution? Or are you happy about the acquisitions that Microsoft made so far with the solution?
Well, I don't know, whatever I say has to be positive. In other words, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but if I could just pick 2 examples. The acquisition of lean manufacturing, ultimately, that was 2009. Microsoft ultimately rewrote the entire lean manufacturing approach, which is an absolutely totally different conceptual model than what they acquired. So on that one topic, you might argue Microsoft needed to be positioned competitively to say they had a lean manufacturing solution, and they acquired a interim solution. Well, they rewrote it.
Right.
And then if I picked another one, Advanced WMS, when they acquired this, it was clearly something that multiple partners had, including the companies I worked for. So there's almost like so many different options. If you're a user or a partner trying to figure out which what you're going to carry in your solution stack, it was always a little confusing. And now they've picked one, and I believe this particular partner, Blue Horseshoe, has continued to enhance their product, and is just showing a tremendous amount of thought leadership. So on that note alone, I'd say Microsoft seemingly picked one that is a thought leader in the past and continues to be a thought leader in the future.
But that acquisition that was mostly about for the retail market, right?
And it turns out, no, warehouse management plays out in multiple industries. I happen to be manufacturing distribution, but it also applies to retail. But,
okay.
Whether it's a distribution center or for retail or the store itself. But I'm seeing it absolutely critical in manufacturing, not just retail.
So the thing with the added content and the acquisitions, it plays into one of the things that one of the other MVPs said on another podcast, where I was talking about how Microsoft has added more code to the system, and he said that we shouldn't forget that a lot of the code added to the system is now obsolete. It's not being used anymore. So I don't know, it's kind of interesting that you say, well, your focus is on the logistics and the warehouse management. I'm thinking about how much of that functionality is now perhaps obsolete, not in use, and it's still within the code base.
Good question. And I'll stick with your exact example of warehouse management. you know, up until this release of, AX2012 R3, they still had an option for warehouse management. It was a historical option, and it had this goofy name called WMS2, or Roman numeral 2.
Yeah.
But it was, I always thought it was a poor design. It actually, some people may have thought it was great, but the subsequent release of advanced warehouse management, basically it became you can no longer use that option. This thing called WMS2. Yeah. So you're right. They may have obsoleted the code. By the way, lines of code has often been a predictor of complexity of a piece of software, right? I'm using a slightly different metric. It's how many pages did it take me to explain how this thing fit together? So my metric is a conceptual model metric. I know lines of code, very good measure, but obsoleting certain things. Lean manufacturing, as I mentioned earlier, they basically threw away the old design and started with a fresh one. So obsoleting lines of code actually is a natural, in my opinion, a natural evolution where you realize there is a better way to do this.
Yeah. But anyway, from your point of view, they are making improvements. It's getting better.
Absolutely. And some of them are just, I don't know about you, but there's a thing called, when you read this thing called What's New in Microsoft Dynamics AX, and it's like, oh boy, it's like a kid at Christmas. There are so many neat little things. Now, some of these, am I saying, are very tiny little things that are polishing the solution. Some of them are new constructs, and a recent example is an article I wrote on a new construct for managing consigned inventory.
When you talk about business processes, Scott, have you seen the business process modeling? Have you used that at all? And how do you feel about AX now working as a tool and lifecycle services and all these other tools that surround the system?
Well, a quick background. I've had a chance to work with different partners who have really spent a lot of time and man years developing effective business processes that are industry specific. And I was working with Columbus, for example, who have gone through this. It's clearly a key part of this life cycle services and business process modeling. And so I myself now, through my work and so forth, I've actually become quite familiar with it, and I've embedded it in all my books and articles. So, this slide just says of these considerations, there are different options for these tools. I mentioned one from Columbus. There's other partners who have got a different tool, but we're all struggling trying to figure out how best to incorporate this into the Microsoft tool set called LCS. So in this example I'm about to show you, I'm going to try to show you how I perceive the business process model. And I may have you flip back to that PowerPoint slide just so I could use that too. I'm going to cover just sales order picking and shipping. It's one of those, fundamentals for everybody. And it turns out I'm going to show you in the context of using advanced warehouse management, because the reason I want to show it to you is there's an underlying conceptual model to it, and ultimately it's the key point of how to reverse out of the business process. So if you just flip to the next slide, this is, more than you may ever want to know, but this shows, you do something at the start, in this case, releasing an order to be picked and shipped. And then, and this is what's hard to explain to people, is things start to happen automatically. Now in warehouse management, you automatically create a load and shipment, you automatically create the picking work. So from a fastest path through the business process, you have your mobile device to report the picking, then you confirm the outbound shipment, and then you finally post your packing slip. So I'm seeing, okay, there's my business process, swim lanes for the different roles. But if you go to the next slide, what's going on, there's some key constructs with those steps. In addition to your sales order line has a status, it has a release status, your shipment has a status, load, your wave, your picking work, and so forth. And in terms of the business process, here are the related constructs that are telling you where are you in the process.
And what we're looking at, what we're looking at, this diagram is from your book, right? This is
correct.
How you display and explain the processes in your book.
Right.
Yeah.
And then if you went to the last slide, and this slide is one of the hardest to document in any ERP system. If you are halfway through your business process, you need to back up because you made a mistake or for whatever reason. How do I get out of it? You know, it's commonly called reversing transactions. And so this diagram is trying to show you, depending on where you're at in the business process, you have several options to back things out. And there's at some point in times you can no longer reverse them. So I didn't mean to give this much detail necessary to walk through so much as the definition of a business process is, and the set of linked business processes are kind of at the heart of a good, effective design to run your business.
Yeah, and also this is one of the examples that you talked about earlier about the incremental updates, because the one that we're showing here is kind of outdated because of the new release that you can actually now, between step 3 and 4 in this, between confirming upon shipments
Correct.
and posting
Absolutely
packing
correct.
steps is
yeah, in what's happened, I think it's in CU11 if you're an R3 user,
Yep.
but it's also in the latest release of Dynamics 365. After step 3, confirming the outbound shipment, prior to these new releases, you couldn't back things up. Well, they've introduced this transaction to say, okay, now you can back things up after step 3. Absolutely. It's a nice polishing of the business process.
I have to say, I really like these diagrams. The way they explain things in a different way. Just if I, as a developer, wanted to understand how it's working, I would probably go to the user interface, and I have to sort of get a conceptual image inside of my head or draw it out. But your diagrams, they are really, really, really nice. So I should probably read up on your books.
we all should. Everybody. It's that's probably kind of why we wanted you on, because there's not a lot of literature that is kind of this extensive and shows everything, and there is a lack of documentation of this type for anything really in AX, like financials and anything. There should be somebody who would step up, and we gotta inspire somebody to go out and write a book. But we'll talk about this process on how to kind of get through this and make a book. But let's just sum up what we talked about, because we're gonna have a section after this where we'll get into it. But you want to summarize kind of your research and how you want to summarize your writing about AX?
Well, this particular year, 2016, has been one of those years where if I never ever write a book again, I might be happy, because this year was 7 of them, and where do you go from there? But the intent is to continue to write articles that incrementally improve things, and then what I've done is, from the set of articles, you come out with a new edition. But I think for those of us in the field, if you run as fast as you can, you hope to stay abreast of how fast this field's moving. And for myself, I've given my focus. I'm hoping to keep incrementally contributing to the field in manufacturing, supply chain management.
We're back with a podcast about Dynamics. So we've got some MVP royalty joining us today. We've got Dr. Scott Hamilton, who is the author of so many great books within the supply chain and manufacturing scene, and we are lucky enough to pick his brain about his experiences with the system. And I want to kind of go back to your background, way back when you started, because you were at another company that produced. Was that a manufacturing software that you?
Correct. If I went back, coming out of college, it'd be I didn't realize it at the time, but I'm implementing ERP systems at the time. And then I ended up getting a PhD in information systems for manufacturing. And coming out of that, went to work for software vendors, and 5 of us started one. It's called Fourth Shift. We ended up 3,500 implementations, 500 people. But that's where I wrote that. Coming out of that, the first book, a McGraw-Hill textbook on maximize your ERP system. And that right at that same time was when Microsoft acquired Navision and Exapta. And so I went to look at both of them. I was familiar with Great Plains because I used to compete against them. And I picked Navision as the better product. So wrote a book about that. And out of the case studies, that I was familiar with in manufacturing, it had a lot of shortcomings, but it was a simpler, easier to use and implement system, which I have a bias towards trying to get these things in quickly, which argues you better have a reasonably simple, at fourth shift across, I think it was 3,000 implementations where we measured it. The average elapsed time from when you first met as a project team to cutover was 3.7 months. So that's my bias. Now, in Navision, in my opinion, you can do that. With Exact, it became more difficult, but it was a much deeper set of functionality for manufacturing. And then there's the technology considerations, which you guys are much closer to than I am. And it just seemed like the right platform. And then you finally look at where Microsoft was spending the money, and you realized, well, Navision is good and all that, but if you follow the money, Dynamics AX was really where the money was going.
Yeah, so you were able to choose between the Microsoft platforms. Any other considerations when you kind of wanted to get into the scene of ERP?
Well, I did consider, the major options: the Oracle, the SAP, the Infor, in one sense, but Infor is a multitude of systems now. But the point is, I considered them, but it was kind of, after I finished the book on Navision, I said, okay, now I'll do one on Exapta, and then I'll do one on Oracle, and then I'll do one on SAP. Well, you finally just reach burnout. You go, if I run as fast as I can't even keep up with AX.
Did you get hooked in because that was the first book, or was it a conscious decision to kind of go to?
No, Navision was the first book.
Yeah,
AX is the second, and then you realized that this is where I could make potentially a significant contribution. I'll try a second book. Well, then, this is the mistake. Once you start going down this path, you can write. I'm now on the fifth edition, so. Right now, I have a future for the next 30 years of trying to write books on the same darn topic.
But you like that, so you pick up a subject and you start writing. If you find it interesting, you start writing about it.
Well, that'd be, I'll pick the example of AX 2009 and ultimately 2012 and 2012 R3. As each new functionality became apparent, I'd write articles about it, and then you finally add up the 30 articles and put them as additional sections within a book. Or the other approach, which I normally take, is you literally write the book, which takes 6 to 12 months, and then you strip out various articles, which could be interesting. But yeah, the hardest part, and I think you have considered writing a book, is you have to start with an outline. My outlines, because I measure there's several metrics I use, but how many revisions did it take you to come up with the final table of contents? Usually I get to 30 revisions for that. It's constantly changing, where you realize I'm going to throw something out. Because book length considerations at the level I'm writing become an issue. Had I included everything in the most recent book, it would have been a 900-page book for supply chain management. It's somewhere near 500. As you go beyond that, this is just too much. So, it takes typically, a very fast writer, and I'm pretty fast. If at the end of your book you could average 3 pages a day, you're actually doing quite well.
Yeah.
If you write a 500-page book, all of a sudden you're going, oh my goodness, that's several hundred days of writing. So
okay, I'll admit that I still haven't read any of your books so far. But and you say you're a fast writer. You sound like a writer because you enjoy writing and you could write a lot. But so your books, they will then contain a lot of examples of how the processes work, various angles, or Are they filled with diagrams? And because I've heard so far there's not a lot of screenshots, but what is contained within those 500 pages?
Right. Boy, should I just start picking up at page 1 and read from there?
Because I can imagine that some of these topics could be hard to explain for the layperson.
2 of the most complex topics in an ERP system for manufacturing. One is costing and the whole cost calculations. And as you go into actual costing, the complexity even gets worse. But then also the whole concept of MRPs, math, and the whole, it's called master planning logic. Once again, one of the most complex pieces of the software, and those chapters are 60 pages long each.
Right.
And
did you cover master planning in your books to detail?
Say again.
Did you cover master planning?
It's called, the more global name is called sales and operations planning, where master scheduling is one piece of it. So the chapter is called sales and operations planning. Now, it's not in the warehouse book because that doesn't deal with this in the supply chain book for discrete manufacturing and for process.
Okay.
How? And so,
but you work with as you said, you kind of contemplated working with different types of systems.
Right.
So you looked into and you met a lot of competitors out in the market, and of course, as a pre-sales, you said you work as a pre-sales consultant. You get into functionality battles with different types of systems, and of course, when taking over existing systems from other companies and doing, let's say, new implementations of AX and coming from some type of warehouse system, how do you feel that Dynamics 365 for operations, let's call it that, is used and can stack up to other types of best of breed systems and systems like Infor and other competitors?
You're right. My role has generally been pre-sales. Some percentage of my time is consulting with, on the implementation that I've just helped to sell, or oftentimes it's a company who is an existing AX user and then needs to upgrade. So a slightly different skill set. At the pre-sales, they're trying to evaluate your system. Usually there's several key driving forces going on where you're trying to say, if we can address these needs, and here are some estimate of your gaps, but you stay at, it's very hard to just go feature and function and still win the sales cycle, no matter what. But the darn thing is, if you can work with somebody who has now been using the system for a year and they understand, we made lousy decisions when we might have started off because we were uninformed. We wanted to customize everything. Those are the ones that are the more interesting, where you go, I think if you just use the standard software this way, you're going to keep the system reasonably simple and straightforward, and then any customizations you do need, let's just incrementally build them on top of that mental model. But it takes a shift in your mental model, and you see it in the vocabulary that they're using. All of a sudden, the vocabulary reflects some of the Dynamics AX, mental models. Just how do you describe your business? When you first meet somebody, they're heavily biased towards their existing system and the existing way to describe their business.
Well, I think it's one of the powerful things with your books is that if you, as a salesperson or as a consultant, enter a meeting with a customer, and they see that they have your book up there on the table and they've read through it and they understand the content, then you better be prepared as a partner.
Have you ever come into a meeting or been at a customer that has read your books without you kind of pushing them on it?
Yeah, actually, it has happened, and my hourly rates just went up $100 per hour for those people. It is nice. I don't know, I'll pick one example. I was at a convergence conference, didn't meet the president of this company, but he had gone to the bookstore, bought my books for his entire management team. And somehow now I get the call from his management team saying, we'd like to invite you down to help us with this decision of buying AX. I said, I'd be happy to help. And he says, we all have your book. I said, okay, great.
How does it? Yeah, because again, so you consulted on people wondering if they're gonna implement AX at all, or is it kind of like how we're going to do it?
This company was trying to come off an old system. They just wanted somebody to come in with an independent assessment, saying, diagnose how we're running the business, and convince us that AX can do a better job. Okay. So
yeah,
that's what. I may have lost track of your question, but the whole point is the books represent, the body of knowledge. Actually, I like using this metric. This is how much you're going to need to learn. And if I put that 500 pages in front of you and said, we're now going to rip out all the pages that don't apply to you.
Right.
You're actually down to, let's say, 300 to 350 that apply to a given business. And then I'm saying this is about how much you're going to need to learn. And if you want the advanced warehouse management, here's your next 200 pages. But even then, you go, how, when you walk into a software package as a new buyer, no matter how many demos you sat through, you actually don't really know that software. And ultimately, this metric of how complex is it? No, I don't believe any other ERP package, such as SAP or Oracle, has similar books in a series. I've called the guy who's written a couple books for Oracle, and he said, I'll never do that again, because it is quite painful to write these things.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know of any other series that are, or at least any books that are available in this type of, let's say, business process coverage, where you kind of go into a subject matter at this level, because what's
really
missing is the financial part of it, and as you said, costing and cost management, and all these other project management and project accounting, and there's so many topics that should be. Maybe I should write a book soon about.
Well,
something.
If I could make a wish, I wish somebody to write a book about retail, because it's not an area I'm familiar with, and something like this, which would walk me through all the major constructs and how to run the business. What are the things you even have to worry about? Which, by the way, here's the software functionality to support those needs. I'd love that.
If somebody was up for the challenge, would you kind of take them on to say, this is how my process is, and you start off at this base, and this is how I did it, and how you maintain it, and just because
start your sentence again saying at a college level.
No. How if somebody should do this? If somebody goes in and say, well, okay, I probably could write a book about retail, because the first stepping stone is kind of like, you got to know how to write a book, because writing a book isn't just posting something on a blog or doing something like that. It's a structural building from A to Z, and as you said, you had a lot of revisions. But would you be open for kind of like tutoring in those cases where somebody wanted to write a book?
Oh yeah, I don't know if I'd be the right tutor, but
there's nobody else, Scott.
Well, maybe on my topic I could tutor, but this idea of probably 2 or 3 guidelines. Okay, you start off with a reasonably, just your best effort at a outline.
Table of context.
Table of contents is really what it amounts to.
Yeah,
and you're always tuning that. At least I was. Some people maybe could write that out in your. And then there's another aspect of scope. For me, I actually would not even know how many pages I'm going to come up with until I was almost done. And at some point in time, you're the author. You get a chance to say, I'm not going to cover it. It's just too much. But after that, it's my type of prior research means I have to be in the field. It takes me a year to write one after the release of the software, because I need to be in the field. I need to be challenged on all the different functionality. So little by little, I'm building out, this is what is the most important. I was shaped though by my field experience. What was out of my 1,000 companies I've been in? What was the most frequent questions of how do I run my business? And I wanted to make sure I covered those. Well, the final, the helpful hint. There's a sense of discipline where, whether it's in the evenings or during the weekends or how you sit down and you write, and at the end of the day, you don't leave your desk until, let's say, 5, and you may have only written 1 page that day because you had to do a lot of prior research. I call it the iron butt theory of writing, but you sit there and you stick with it till you get it done.
It's a tough world of authors.
A lot of people have half-done books.
Yeah.
Well, even blog posts can be like that. We did discuss it a little bit on the previous podcast with someone else, Jonathan and Joa. Jake was his name. Yeah.
Yep.
And it was like some topics you want to write about, but then you start writing about it, and you get to a point that it's not complete, and you want to test it even further. You want to quality assure your content. And then you struggle with some bugs or some lacking features, and at some you just give up, and then you just throw it away. That has happened to me several times. I just started writing on something and I had to throw it away because it wasn't working. But then again, you're like you said, when you're in the field, you have worked with something and you know it works. Then you want to share a blog post on it, and maybe perhaps I could put a lot of blog posts together and put it in a book, but I don't know. I'm really impressed by the work you've done, and I bet you love to write. You gotta love to write. You gotta like to write. You write a lot of books and a lot of blog posts or articles on your column.
Well, part of it is, remember, I think if you're in the field, which I think you are, you're actually verbally describing much of what you're trying to write about. So and you might use diagrams to explain it to people. So I might argue you're kind of doing it anyhow. Now you hit another key point. When you write, you would like it to make it look good, which means you don't want to come off with a lot of errors. So you're probably, if you're like me, I go in and I only write what I've personally tested.
Right. Yeah, I do write a lot of long emails to my colleagues and customers. That happens. As they start with, "I'm sorry, here comes another wall of text," and then I get to the point where I write a long email explaining a lot of stuff. So you're probably right. Could have probably put that in a blog post.
Right. And I'll come back to this point. You're right about I've said many unfinished articles. Because to take it to the finish line, that last 1% or the last 5% or whatever you're doing is sometimes the hardest to do, because you just have to you stay with it till it's done.
So your aim is somehow to get a closure of whatever you're writing.
And I do use one trick. If there's errors, I finally just say, look, that's out of scope relative to this blog or article or book, and you just say, that's okay.
That's brilliant. Yeah.
So just coming back to yourself, Fredrik, you're in the field now, consulting or pre-sales. Where are you?
I'm a kind of in between. I do a lot of pre-sales, but I also do consulting. And it's a good time because we have kind of the pinnacle of technology at our disposal to go into sales, and it's not that.
Just this week, I've actually had 3 people call me. People I've consulted with, and they said, "Okay, Scott, we are currently a user on AX 2009, whatever. Should we use 2012 R3 or should we use Dynamics 365?" And I'm going, well, there's multiple facets to that. They both work. How do you give a crisp answer to that type of question?
Well, me, I'm a technology junkie, so for me, it's always the to bind yourself to an old system. This is my personal opinion, of course, but it's kind of like going into a car dealership, and do you want to buy the new model that has all this technology, and or do you want to kind of buy the hatchback that's out back with the broken taillights? And
I think there's a lot of customers out there running AX4 and AX2009, and I think it would be in Microsoft's best interest to help them get upgraded to Dynamics 365 for operations as soon as possible. So
it's both the security stuff and a legacy application stuff, because there are so many advantages just to have that HTML5 client, technology-wise. You don't have to do installs. You can access it anywhere. So just that technology leap on the client side is pretty fantastic. Then there's the negative side, maybe, is all the if somebody wants it on-prem, we don't have that story fully covered yet. And we talked about that as well on the last podcast. When you have sort of like sell in this cloud solution that is all cloud and everything is hosted, and you save money because you don't have to have a local data center, and then you go in and say, but if you want it on-prem, you have to have kind of both of these.
This, I'm not necessarily a guy who wants to be at the bleeding edge of any technology. So I'd argue there's a wait and see another 6 months, and that if you could start your implementation now, you still could make your decision, 6 months from now, because you don't even go live.
Right. But it's also fair to compare R3, AX2012 R3 with AX7 in terms of functionality. If you forget about the technology and only think about the processes, so you could prepare yourself with R3, but then you could aim for Dynamics 365 for operations as the final ERP solution you're going to run with.
True, meaning you might, for the first few months of an initial implementation, you're saying learn 2012 R3.
Well,
my dilemma there is the user interface and the whole navigational details are just so different. You're going to make somebody learn two very distinctly different
UIs. Yeah.
If you want to go in and check if your data works on this, and you have a server running, and you can kind of lift everything up to this 2012 platform just to see if your data comes in and if it works.
Right.
But on the user training, the concept of the work center is very much changing how you would use the the software, and also there's a lot of functionality that they kind of didn't brag about that much when they started. You're in manufacturing, of course, Scott, and this idea of doing that post calculation, just going in and saying, I want everything that it has a variance of. Let's say I'll accept anything that is within a 90% range of what it was estimated. You can just go in and you can click a button and just say anything that is below 90 or 90% of what was estimated probably is missing some type of input into the manufacturing cycle and should be highlighted. And you couldn't do that. That is something that is included in. And then you go in and just through that work center, you can just go in and add these the transactions that are missing that probably somebody didn't use on their work order or register.
I think you did an excellent point. That's the whole accessibility to the data and the related type of BI, or how can I easily get at it to understand what's going on?
Yeah, and I've seen an enormous improvement since 2009 to 2012, especially on the time and attendance side, where they kind of got into, how should we improve this to be as people are working? How are people using the system? And I think they're putting a lot of effort into understanding the customers and the workflows and everything. And through that is hitting the mark much better by the basic system. It's not that vanilla as it was before. If you go back to 2009, it was just screens after screens after screens with these very basic header, footer, journal type of inputs. which is kind of the ERP way to do it. But then in 2012, they got more focused on interaction and how the users apply their everyday work cycle into the system, and that kind of evolved into a much better process. So I think it's evolving, and especially when you compete with best of breed functionality in other applications, it's getting much tighter, and you can compete more now than it ever could. So and it's a continuous improvement, and
no, those are
that story, and also it's something that I'm kind of is a backstory to all of this technology implementation that's running now. Is you have all these power apps, you have Flow, which kind of enables you to access cross processes that kind of wasn't a story in your ERP system before. We can take an example of a customer maybe that I'm kind of working with at the moment, where they have a requirement for pre-registering when their items are coming. They need some type of pre-registering the gate, where they have some type of items that are coming being delivered, and they need some type of solution to kind of have an order system for that, and implementation. And you could kind of code anything into AX, or you can work with it, but maybe the best way to do it is using a Power App and creating an application that they work outside. So all your data is handled outside of AX, but when you kind of hit OK and the truck is coming into the warehouse, it'll feed into the ERP system and put in the required transactions that you want. So you can do all that outside of the system without even touching any code. And it's a much better development situation instead of going in and creating everything inside of course it's a disruption to the partners that are working in AX that want to go in and write code and write new functionality, but on the other side you have the app source, which probably we could dive in and find a solution for this in a couple of months or a year or so, where people have actually does actually have an application that could cover that business process. So it's a lot of things are happening where you don't see the entire picture. You have to kind of go in and they encourage the customer to go out and find the solution that you need to cover that business process and add it in. So there's a lot of stuff happening. There's and that's also a good reason to choose AX7, because there's so many other components that can touch this application more than 2012. It's legacy already.
Yeah. Right. Well, I have to speak as a developer. My main concern often is the life cycle of the application. The cradle to continuous life, as they call it, for the application. And the fine balance with AX, the way I see it, is that AX has this AOT, this application story, developer story, that is really compelling for us developers, because it's fairly easy to create something, to create a table, to create a form, to create some logic. And now the way it evolves now is that you're going to have a longer turnaround between the ID, the actual implementation, and when it's out there in the system, in the live system or in the testing system. It's not as easy as it was back in old AX, with just the AOT, change something, run it again. Now, obviously, AX2012 is partly a different story. But having said that, imagine building apps in Power Apps that you basically can throw away after. If you don't like the app or it doesn't do the job it was intended to, you can throw it away. I would, as a developer, my main concern would be, okay, I want to have that app. It's business critical. I don't want to lose it. I want to have that that ALM story correct, that lifecycle story correct for that application, and I don't think you have that right now with the Power Apps. So I'm still a little bit, I don't know.
I might be jumping the gun.
Yeah.
But it kind of, for me, it's compelling because I don't have to call a developer to kind of do a basic proof of concept to enable some type of business process and say, hey, we can cover this for a fraction of the cost, and you can do the development yourself and whatnot. And there is a pipe to connect into the system, and this is the correct way to do it. And it's the same access level that you get with accessing the client and putting data in yourself, but you're kind of doing it automated through an app that gives you at some type of phase in that process for that app. It kind of hands over or pulls out data from your ERP system.
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, it empowers the consultant, it empowers the end user, because they can tap into the data, their business data, and do things like adding functionality or reporting or something on top of that data. So that's really, really powerful stuff, obviously.
Yeah, but the CRM has a separate type of development environment where you can do these types of like data-driven apps as well in the system, kind of a low-tier development level. And then they have the full-blown development level in the CRM, and of course, in Dynamics 365 for operations, you have the mobile platform that you can develop for, or you can create some type of business logic, and you get all that sort of like flavor for the offline and everything, which you don't get with a Power App. So there's so many platforms that you actually can take, and there's a roadmap that you can just pick and choose what you like, and there's no real answer to what is actually the best for this. I'm sure there will be a lot of discussions to what type of technology are we going to solve this issue on. So I would guess, being a solution architect, kind of, you really have to up your game. You don't have to. You shouldn't just only focus on the application and the functional side of it. Now you really have to go in and understand the technology behind every type of facet of the application.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how AX evolves as an ERP system, where now the notion of having like a marketplace where you can pick and choose from various ISV solutions.
Not only ISV solutions. I mean, the VAR partners is now, of course, that's where they put in their applications and kind of market their solutions. And it's important to have that type of story. And there's a quality signature to having it on that portal, and anybody in the business can go in and select your application. It's going to be tough for VAR partners because they're going to meet competitors in that marketplace, and the customers will be aware of it, and they will say, well, your application don't have this and that functionality, but we can buy it for this and that much from this VAR partner.
It's not even on the store. They're going to, if you're trying to sell me something that's not on the store or the marketplace, the question then is, why is that? Why haven't you quality assured your solution? But what about, because we did talk about all the previous acquisitions by Microsoft. Are they gonna stop acquiring new functionality to their product? Are they gonna say, well, now it's your turn. Customers, pick whatever you need on the store. We're not going to ship that as part of the standard solution, or will they continue to add more functionality? That's I don't know.
If that was a question to me, it's, I'm assuming they'll continue to do more acquisitions, and I don't have any crystal ball of what those would be, but let me pick an example. Enterprise asset management, the whole machine maintenance, and once again, there's numerous options out in the field right now from different partners. Microsoft seemingly will wait and then they pick one, or maybe it's a product configurator. There's several out in the market. Turns out, based on your scenario in manufacturing, at least, there's major variations in how a configurator works for one type of product versus another. So I don't know, they'll still do acquisitions, including, I'll pick the process manufacturing. They may have initially bought process manufacturing, but then they incrementally purchased more from the same partner. So some of those acquisitions, think of an incremental purchase from Blue Horseshoe, for example.
I wonder also how all of these solutions, because they're not built in a vacuum. Most of them are dependent on the standard solution somewhat. And if you think about a lot of these solutions, they have to be on par with the latest version of AX at any point in time. And supporting older installs, we see many of our customers, they don't necessarily update their system every month or every week whenever there's another hotfix put out there. So some customers even run with ERP solutions that haven't been patched for maybe perhaps over a year. What about their ISV solution that they have installed, which is heavily dependent on whatever version they were on at the point in time? A lot of these ISV vendors, they don't have a copy of their solution for every single version back in time anyway. So, but that's going to improve with AX7 in my head, due to the fact that just ahead of the technology, where you're not going to overshadow standard anymore as much, or not at all. Hopefully, you will extend on top of it. So that's probably going to be a lot better.
Thank you very much for getting back to us. It's been very nice to have you on. So you are Dr. Scott Hamilton. We can reach you at scotthamiltonphd@outlook.com. And if you're into anything that has to do with warehouse management, supply chain management, and manufacturing, you should most definitely go to msdynamicsworld.com and check out Dr. Scott Hamilton's profile there and get his books, because they are a must-read if you're in the business. Of course, Tommy, you are at yetanotherax.com.
Yeah, that's right. Yet another AX.
And Skaue at Twitter. I'm AX Fredrik at Twitter, and you can reach my stuff at denextips.com. And you can also get an audio copy of this. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can get an audio copy of this by going to iTunes and searching for Dynamics Podcast, or you can find us on Stitcher and anywhere else that podcasts are basically aggregated. And there's also a site for you if you want to directly download it. You can go to Dynamics, that's DIN Podcast, DYN podcast.wordpress.com. That's where you can get everything about us. So thank you very much, Scott, and we'll hope to pick your brain again sometime next year when your new books are hitting the market.
Thank you. Have a good Christmas.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.